Hi there, Vern back again for lesson 4, and lesson 4 is all about getting started. Let me just give some context. Lesson 4 is the fourth of 13 lessons, and those 13 lessons make up the first quarter of a year-long course that we're calling Finding Traction. Things that we believe if you practice each week for a year will bring you to real traction as you move away from unwanted activities and move towards God's call for your life. So today we are going to specifically ask this question: do you want to get well? You know, that's always a tough question when people ask that, because I'm going honestly, well, yeah, I do. A chunk of me wants to get well, but there's also a part of me that is not real enamored with the idea of changing or leaving some of those things that have provided such comfort or pleasure to me. Recently, I had a single guy say, Vern, he said, for me to walk away from porn really feels like a divorce. Now, for you married guys, for me, he's saying to me, if you got a divorce from your wife, that would be really devastating to you, because that you would lose what had been a big part of your life. But me as a single guy, I feel that to walk away from porn would feel like a divorce. So I understand the ambivalence that we sometimes face in this question. Maybe a better way to ask the question is this: okay, are you willing to begin to take the steps that are necessary to get free, to begin a journey of recovery? And you could say, well, maybe. Tell me what some of those steps are so I can more properly gauge my degree of readiness. And I'm going to give you a couple of them today that are going to be necessary. And here's the first one. You will need to define your sexual sobriety. What does success mean for you? Now, if you're like most addicts, there's that term that you may or may not want to use, but most people in addictive thinking tend to be vague. I'm having a tough week. I could have looked at porn for 24 hours a day, but we call it a tough week. I'm really having a struggle with my eyes. We keep things vague. We also do this thing where we rationalize or negotiate with ourselves. It's like the person who struggles with alcohol and they say, what, I think I have a drinking problem, but what, I think if I just keep my drinking to the weekends, it'll be fine. It won't affect my work. Or what, I am not going to have anything after a couple beer, or it's only light beer for me. Any of those kind of approaches. And most people would say, if you have a real drinking problem, those are going to be highly ineffectual. In the same way, when we negotiate with ourselves and we're unwilling to actually get specific about the behaviors which are destroying our lives, then we're not really ready to begin to take steps of recovery. Now, towards some specificity here, I'm going to use Mark Laser, who is a recognized expert in the area of recovery. And he has a podcast called Men of Valor. I'll refer to that a little bit later. But there I heard an acronym that he often uses to help people put some degree of clear, practical, specifics to what they want to have or not have in their life. And one acronym he uses is the acronym LAMP. L-A-M and P. L is for lying. Anything which involves deception, lying to those people we love. Usually that's a gateway activity, either on the front end or the back end of our acting out, that we want to remove. I would say that actually is the one which will most clearly destroy your relationships, because that really strikes at the heart of what every relationship needs, and that is, of course, trust. A is for adultery. Now, obviously, it could mean physically being unfaithful to your partner, but adultery could be simply fantasizing about the woman you work with, or the woman next door, or the woman at the checkout line or whatever. Those are forms of emotional or fantasy, which is like adultery. It could be simply scanning somebody. Well, that's, it could be a form of adultery. Emotional adultery, where you're developing intimate, close relationships, having conversations of an emotional or a deep level with somebody who is not your spouse, that really violate the heart of the boundaries of your relationship. There's many different forms of adultery. M is for masturbation, and that really often goes hand in hand with pornography. But and some of you might have questions about that one in particular. We'll maybe deal with that at a later topic. But for many people, that just becomes their gateway activity into other activities. And so they say, it's all about sexual release in the end. And so masturbation coupled with other forms of activity are just no-go areas for me. And finally, pornography. Pornography in all the various forms. Any sexually stimulating material. It may not be a website. It may be. It could be erotic stories, things on tape, things on TV. It could be forms of chat lines or, which I guess would be a form of adultery as well. But here's the key. You are going to need to flesh out those activities which cause you problems, which violate your boundaries. They may violate your boundaries with God if you have a spiritual background or a foundation that you're working from. They may violate the boundaries or the covenant of your relationship with your wife, or they just might violate your own boundaries. Say, this is not the kind of person that I want to be. I feel horrible about myself. This is not the best version of myself. And you're going to need, in detail, to walk through those areas and just say, these are not acceptable. We're going to use a term, these are my red activities. Stop sign. We don't go there. Now, it's also important for you not just to talk about the things you don't want to do. You have been created as a sexual person. And I want you to walk out and think about, what does it mean to be sexually successful? What does it mean for you to be a sexual person as God created and intended you to be? I want you to spend some time coming up with a definition of what is the kind of person that you think God really had when he created sexuality and he gave that to you. If you have that, it will also help you begin to look at, am I moving closer towards that goal, not just moving away from things that I don't want in my own life. Now, the second step to getting started is a step that we're going to call cleaning house. And cleaning house is really where you remove, just like spring cleaning, you remove every unwanted thing that is in your life or is part of that old way of life that you no longer want to participate and cultivate in your life. It's not uncommon for people to keep a stash or a computer hard drive or a thumb drive or something. And you are really, if you hold on to that, you're really sabotaging your recovery. Some people might keep a business card, or they might keep a picture of an old girlfriend, or they might, keep that Facebook account. Whatever it is, which for you leads you back into those no-go areas of town, so to speak. And I would just say, if you're serious about recovery, you are going to have to list and then clean house in every area of your life. Now, we're going to deal with technology in our next lesson, but I will say this about technology. If you're acting out, and it probably does involve smartphones, tablets, computers, television, gaming systems, whatever it is, then you are going to have to address that area as well in your life. Now, we're going to get to some of the specifics around that again next lesson, but it is my experience when you are unwilling to deal with open access points, it's really saying, you know what, the fact that I would clean out my stash of magazines under my bed, but the fact that I have a ready-made stash of magazines available on my tablet is really not a whole lot different. Sometimes I lead a group every week, and sometimes I'll have people say things like, I really got to do something about this technology. I really need to do something about my smartphone. And they'll say that week after week. And because our group is not a super invasive group, we're forcing people to do things. We're just saying, yeah, it sounds like you do. But I've noticed with those people, they don't find traction. They're not getting better in their recovery because there's just those common things where they recognize they need to do something, clean house in some way, but they're just not fully prepared to do it. And that goes back to our opening question. Are you wanting to get better? Really is, do I really want to take the opening steps to begin down this pathway of recovery? So now, as we do each week, we want to take this information and we want to now apply it into your situation. Because that really, again, is where we really begin to put some chains on the tires, so to speak, and begin to really say, okay, now this is going to need to be applied to me. Now, the first question really is walking out of the lesson today is defining my red activities. I want you to go through and list out all of those unwanted sexual behaviors, things that you struggle with, things that you've struggled with in the past, things that you've been tempted with or thought about. And I want you to list those, your red activities, and just go ahead and list them out. That's very important to do. Second thing I want you to do is I want you to describe your version, your definition of sexual success. What does it mean for you in your present situation? Now, if it's going to be different if you're single than if you're married, what does sexual success look like for you in your situation right now? What would it look like for you to be successful in your area of sexuality? Third thing I want you to do is I want you to go through and I want you to list any areas where you still have any collections or stash or ready access to pornographic material. We'll leave most of the technology for next lesson, but list, what have you done? Just maybe what have you done to remove all the stashes? And the biggest question is, are you still holding on to any things which commonly trigger you, or you go back to, those favorite places that you revisit that need to be, completely removed, whether you have a bonfire or whether you, take a hammer to a hard drive. I don't know what that is, but something that removes them from your possession once and for all time. I would say, as we do each week, it really is my intent to help you clearly see some of the steps. These are not meant to overwhelm you, but I think hopefully you can see this is really not rocket science. If I begin with God's help and the support of some other men to walk this out, then I can begin to take some steps that many, many, many men have taken before me and have found success. So as we do each week, I want to give you some supporting resources that I think can help reinforce this as well. The first one is a couple podcasts from Porn Free Radio. Episode 61 is The Strength to Delete It All. Episode 66 is Do You Want to Fix This? A couple good reinforcing podcasts there. And then I made reference to Mark Laser and his podcast called Men of Valor. And he has a tool in there called the 3 circles. Part of that, and the first circle that we're dealing with and we've dealt with in this lesson, is the inner circle, or what we've called the red activities. So I'd like you to listen to that, and that can help you just reinforce the material as well. Let me just say in closing that it is my hope and intention from my own recovery to be a source of support for you. This has been such a battle in my life, and finding freedom and gaining traction has just opened up so much in my life that was never there before. Simply living free from guilt and shame, just right there is worth all of the pain and loss that leaving pornography has had in my life. Again, I'd love to connect with you. The website is bandofbrothers.care. My email is bandofbrothers@shaw.ca. And again, if there's anything I can do to be of help for you or to help, give you a heads up as to where you could turn, I'd love to do that. So God bless you in your recovery. And we'll see you back for the next lesson where we specifically get into technology and the things that we need to do regarding it.